Hi, my name's Tony. We haven't met before. This is my first ever Home Assistant tutorial video. Now, as you can tell by my accent, I'm Australian. And what you may not know about Australians, unless you're an Australian, is that we tend to love technology. We are known worldwide for being early adopters of everything. And a lot of that is to do with the fact that we live on an island at the arse end of the world, and we often get forgotten about. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who likes to push the envelope. In fact, sometimes I can't even find the envelope. So when I'm trying to do something in Home Assistant, I have to do hours of research because I'm not a giant nerd. Well, I am a giant nerd, but the problem is that I'm an older guy. I'm not like 20. I'm a few years older than that. But what happens is I'll find some information about how to integrate something into Home Assistant, and inevitably, the jerk who's written the tutorial has forgotten about some fundamental piece of information. And that means that you have to spend hours and hours going further and further down the rabbit hole, trying to find the glitch in the matrix, whatever, in order to try and figure out what on earth the dude's talking about when he says, just do this, run this command. So what I've decided to do is create some tutorials for people like me, people who are inexperienced with Linux in particular, don't know anything about Python or know very little about Python. They aren't the kind of guy who wants to hack into the Pentagon. They may be a little bit technophobic even, whatever. So the idea is this is for real newbies. So for those of you who are more experienced, maybe look elsewhere because this might drive you a bit bananas. But for those of you who are newcomers, hopefully this will be the right sort of tutorial for you. So without further ado, let's get started. So in today's tutorial, what we're going to do is a couple of things. We're going to connect Home Assistant to use the Tuya Cloud service. That's one part of the tutorial. The other part of the tutorial is we're going to use the local Tuya connection and show you how to do that. So for those of you who don't know what Tuya Smart is, Tuya make a, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right, Tuya, anyway. Tuya, probably the largest manufacturer of IoT devices in the world, commercially. There are non-commercial, I mean, Sonoff, they would be one that make IoT devices, but if you don't want to turn your house into a fireplace, best avoid them because they're crap. And I know a lot of people love them, but I don't. So I prefer a device that is commercially available. And in Australia, if you're unaware, you have to be careful when you're using IoT devices, because if you put something in your wall and your house burns down, like aforementioned Sonoff device, and your insurance company finds out, sorry to say, there will be tears, because your insurance company will say, thank you very much, you're an idiot, and you won't get any money. So for me at least, the preference is to purchase something commercially off the shelf. And in Australia, we have a couple of retailers who are selling Tuya devices, only they're not branded as Tuya. So one example would be Bunnings, and Bunnings have a very wide range of Tuya devices. They're called Grid Connect, but I believe you can also buy them in a couple of the other electrical retailers. Even one of the lighting groups sells their own branded device, which is a Tuya set of smart switches as well. Nonetheless, doesn't matter. So if you buy any of the, Arlec or Deta type products from Bunnings, etc., then they are a Tuya device under the hood. If you're in doubt, there are ways you could find out. You can open the box and then go onto the Tuya or developer site. You'll see a very large library of data sheets. So if you open the case of your IoT device and you see, for example, the chip, which is a TYWEL2 module, then you'll know for certain it's a Tuya device. And that brings me to another point. If you're the kind of person who wants to actually flash Tasmota firmware onto your Tuya device, you can do that too. I'm not going to talk about that in this tutorial. However, I have created a tutorial on my website, which you can follow, which shows you how to install the Tasmota firmware on one of these devices. You do need to know how to solder. You need to be able to or be comfortable with running Linux, etc. So if that's not your thing, then perhaps this tutorial that I'm talking about now may be more beneficial. Now, I'm going to assume that you've already purchased one of the Grid Connect devices, and perhaps even you've already added it to your smartphone using the Grid Connect app. You know, you've opened the box, you've pulled out the instructions, you've clicked on the QR code, and it's already added the device to your app. Now, unfortunately, we can't use the Grid Connect app for our purposes. We need to use a different app. So I'll show you now how to uninstall the device from the Grid Connect app and then add it to the correct application for our purposes. So we'll open up my phone. As you can see, I'm a little bit of a propeller head. I like planes. So we go into the Grid Connect app, and as you can see here, we have our device set up. In my case, it's a globe, and because we need to use a different app other than Grid Connect, because Grid Connect won't work with Home Assistant, there's no integration built for that app, even though it's using the same back end. It's not using the same API structure. So what we do is we select the 3 dots, then we select Remove Device, Disconnect, and Wipe All Data. Okay, and that's now done. It's got rid of the app. So now we need to select the correct app. In this case, it's one called Smart Life, and you should notice that the light will be flashing. If you happen to be in the same room as the device, it'll be in pair mode, in which case, in my case, it's flashing because it's a light. So we select our light. It will then ask you for your Wi-Fi credentials. Obviously, I've blanked that out. If the light is blinking in fast mode, we can hit confirm. You'll notice here there's also a cross with a slow blink. That's a different pairing mode. We're not going to use that. If you want to do it that way, by all means, feel free to look into it yourself. We hit next, and this will take about 2 minutes to set up. If your device is not in pairing mode for whatever reason, just follow the same procedure as described in the manual. I think you need to, for a globe, you need to turn the light on and off 4 times or something like that. For a switch, you have to hold the button for 4 seconds. There is described online how to do that, so you can, by all means, figure that out yourself. So now we've finished, done, and now I can turn the light on and off, which is working. Okay, so now let's move over to Home Assistant, and we'll add the integration to Home Assistant for the Tuya Connect. Now, there's 2 different approaches. We're going to show both of them. The first one is using the cloud connection. So to get to that, we use via the configuration and select integration. So we'll add integration here. We add an integration. It's like type Tuya, and then we add our username. And password. You get the idea. Put the country code in. I just used 1. You could use 61, which is for Australia or whatever country you're in. It doesn't really seem to make much difference as long as it's something. And here you need to select Smart Life because that's the app that we are using. You can use the Tuya native app. The only thing is that when we get a bit further down the road with the next part that we're going to show you, it's a little bit more complicated using the Tuya app. So rather than make it more difficult, I thought we'll use the Smart Life one because it's easier. So we'll use that for now. Hit submit, and then away you go. So now our devices are added. We can click on the devices. Now you can see here there's a bunch of scenes that I had set up in that app that I didn't remove. I could go and delete them if I wanted to, but that's not really important right now. What we need to do is, or what we can do, is we can click on the light. What you can't see is the light is actually going on and off, which is showing me that it's working correctly. So that's it. It's all working great. The only problem with the Tuya Cloud is it's a little bit slow. It's performing quite well at the moment. As I say, you can't see, but when I turn this on and off, it's probably about half a second delay after I do an action before the lights turn on and off. And that's because it's going all the way to the cloud server where that is, wherever that is, in Asia somewhere. It's telling the cloud server, this is what I want to do. Cloud server is reporting back and telling the device what to do. Some people get really, really freaked out about the fact that this is using a cloud app. My data's being put on the internet. You know what? If that's your thing and you're worried about that, stop using the internet, because I'm sorry, folks, but your fears about cloud and data privacy and all that, that horse has well and truly bolted. I'm actually a data scientist by profession. Let me tell you, there's so many ways that companies can identify you. Now, it's not funny. If you watch the show on Netflix called Social Dilemma, it's quite eye-opening, and it gives you a bit of an insight into how all this works. But honestly, if you're worried about that, I'm sorry, but that's too late. There's lots of other ways that companies can track your data. Anyway, moving on. We do have an alternative, which is what I'm going to show you next, and that's by using another tool, which is part of the Home Assistant Community Store. So what we do first is we click on Integrations, and then we add Local Tuya. Okay, so now we are faced with a bunch of information about how to set this up. Now, when I first saw this, I got, oh my goodness, this is like super overwhelming. But really, it's not that difficult once you understand what it's trying to say. Probably the most challenging part is this bit here, which is to find the Tuya device ID and key. Now, if you go to this page here, which is what's recommended, it's really not very helpful because this is one of those pages, as I was saying, the jerk hasn't told you what to do. They've given you half the information and expected you to know how to fill in the blanks. So I guess this is telling me to run this command on a Linux machine of some sort, but I don't know which one. Am I supposed to run it on the Home Assistant, the operating system on my Raspberry Pi, which is running Home Assistant? Or am I supposed to run it inside the Docker session, which is where I'm using HACS.io. And for those of you who don't know what HACS.io is, it's a Home Assistant instance that's running inside of Docker on top of Linux. So I don't know where to run this. So this is absolutely useless. And it goes into a lot of information that really doesn't help you because there's big chunks of information missing. So there is another way, which is what we're going to talk about right now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set up an Android emulator. Now I'm using LD Player. I'll put the link in the description. It's pretty easy to use. It's very fast. So we just start by installing LD Player, and I'll let that happen. I'll pause the recording and come back once it's done. Okie dokie. So installation is now complete. We'll hit start, and hopefully we shall see LD Player boot up. And here it is. Put it on the screen. Takes a second. So again, stop the recording. Okay, so here we are. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to install a couple of apps. Now, there's a couple of approaches to do this. You can use the Play Store as per normal. The only problem with that is you'll end up with the latest version, and that may or may not work. So the other approach that you can use is, which is what I've done, is go to this site, APK Mirror, and I will provide you the link with the exact files you need, and then you can search for the correct APK. So here we have Smart Life, which is the app, and there's the other one as well, which is FD Explorer. I think that's what it's called. And The only challenge with this is some of these files, I mean, you just go in here and hit download. Some of these files are bundled, they're not just individual APKs, so you actually have to split the bundle out, so that's not quite as straightforward. Anyway, I will provide you links directly to the exact files that I'm using, so all I need to do now is grab the file, drag it and drop it to the desktop. This is obviously a lot easier than using the Play Store because you've got to log in and all that crap. This is, it just installs it, done and dusted. So we install the ES File Explorer and we install Tuya Smart Life, and that's it. So while that's running, okay, great. The next thing we will do is open up our Smart Life app. This will boot up and we're going to log in. Now I'm going to pause the recording. I should point out, you will have to agree to the, agree to sacrifice your firstborn child, whatever, whoever reads these. And then you, again, log in. So use the same credentials you used earlier when you logged in on your smartphone. I'm going to pause the recording because I don't want to show you my credentials. I'm very cruel like that. Okay, so now we can see that I have successfully logged in. We can see the globe, the GLD 120 that I had set up earlier. My phone is buzzing away madly because it's telling me that I've logged in somewhere else. That's all good. That's everything we expect. If I click on the button, the light in fact does turn on and off as per expectation. So this is all good, very good. So now what we do, we want to go back to look at the relevant files we're looking for. So the first thing we need to do before we go any further is set up a shared file. So we hit PC shared, go down here, and this is a path, right, where we're going to go to put our file. So I'll put a path in here, and then down here, we'll come to that in a minute. Okay, the next bit has varying degrees of success. So hopefully it'll work out okay for us this time. Every time I've tried to do this, I've had some hitch or other. So we open up our ES File Explorer, and first thing it'll try to do, you've got to go through the, again, sacrifice your firstborn, agree to allow permissions to everything. Because this is running in a virtual environment, it doesn't really matter what you do. I would probably not run quite so aggressively into doing this if I was using it on my phone, but that's just me. So we're going to use it now, and the first thing it wants to do is update. Now I decided to proceed with this because when I didn't do the update, I had lots of issues. So I suspect that's possibly fixing a number of bugs in the original APK that I had downloaded. And it's pretty straightforward, just, as you can see, it's a little bit follow the bouncing ball. And then we get to the next bits, the challenging bits. Before we go any further, the first thing I need to do is set the device, the emulator, into root mode. So we go down to, we click on the little gear wheel, then go to other settings and hit enable. You can also choose a different device. I've been using just a 10G. Doesn't really matter. That happens to be a phone I'm quite familiar with. It's one I used to have. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's not really a big deal. Hit save. It'll ask you to restart. So now it's restarted. We go back and open File Explorer. We'll get probably an ad. It's in Chinese or whatever. What's the point? Now we need to set the correct permissions. So we go Tools and we turn Root Explorer on and Show Hidden Files. Then we go Local, Device, Data, Data, and then scroll all the way to the bottom. Tuya Smart Life, Shared Preferences, and this is the file that we want here. Now, before I go any further, let me just explain what happens here. So when you when you set our shared folder preferences before, we had on the phone side, this is the folder that you save files to in order to hit your shared folder. So what I want to do here is I'm going to open this file, and when I open it, I'm going to hit my 3 dots up here, save as, and then I'm going to store it in my shared folder. So how to find that, in this case, that storage picture folder, we go into the root path, we find mount, shared picture, and that is the folder that is identified here. That's what that folder is. Okay, so if we hit save here, it's telling me there's a file already with the same name because I've already saved it. Now, I can go and find the folder, but I'll just open the file now, just to sort of let you know, this is actually using not real data. So by all means, if you feel that mad that you want to go and look into this, you can. But the two things we want, first one is this dev ID, and the other one we need is local key. And that's here. So that's the other piece of information we need. So this guy here, so we can copy that, put it into a blank text file there, and this guy here. And again, we put that into the text file. So we could even add, just to make it clear what each value is, local key and dev ID. Okie dokie. Now, for completeness, just so that you know that you're looking in the right area, so I haven't spent much time trying to work out how these are all classed in terms of the XML file. But basically, just think about it like this. You've got a bunch of data that relates to each device. Now, in my case, I only have one device, but if I had more than one device, I would have to do the same thing for each of those devices. So you look, I guess the place you start is you look for the name. So we have our name. We know that it's called GLD1200HA. And then going up from that point, we find the local key and the dev ID. If I had another device, a switch or a gang switch or whatever, I need to find the name and then work back up to find the local key and dev ID. Okie doke, let's see what we need to do next. So we've got an idea of where our device ID and local ID is. We also need to find our IP address, and that's what we're going to do now. But before I go any further, I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it into my little text file. And then I'm going to put the relevant information in the right place. If you've ever had anything to do with configuring YAML files in Home Assistant, in my opinion, the biggest downfall of Home Assistant is YAML is a pain in the butt, an absolute pain in the butt. If you don't have the right dash in the right place, the spaces in the right place, it barks at you. And oftentimes I've noticed that even copying it, like I just did off this website, you end up with the wrong indent. So there's no guarantee that even doing what I've just done works, but at least you've got a roughly approximate chance of it working. So now what we need to do is figure out our IP address. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, from the completely ridiculous to the simple. And I'm going to go the simple approach. What I noticed is that the last series of digits in our device ID are actually the MAC address. Now, if you don't know what a MAC address is, a MAC address is just essentially a unique ID that every Ethernet device has
burnt into its firmware. It's a way that all the manufacturers who make internet or who make devices that connect onto Ethernet, whether it's a wireless device or a physical Ethernet device, they have a unique ID, and it's made up of a bunch of what's called hexadecimal. So it's not decimal, it's letters and numbers. If you want to know what that is, look up hexadecimal. It's a way of uniquely identifying it. Part of it is a manufacturer's ID. The other part of it's just a unique ID. Anyway, so I discovered that that's the MAC address, and that means that if I go into my router, which is here and in here, then I look through the list of devices, then I find this is the MAC address. Let's make sure. 98F4ABC83014. 98F4ABC83014 is in fact correct. So I know with a very high degree of confidence that this MAC address is my device, therefore this is the IP address. So I can just copy this, then go into my little file that I'm setting up here, and then add the IP address. Now, needless to say, because you can see that the router is blurred out, I'm not showing you my actual IP address. So have fun with that. Okay, so now let's just install this repository. So this is going to correctly install the relevant files into the correct place so that Home Assistant can use it. As you see here, it's saying pending restart. So what I'll do is go through the process of restarting. If you go down to server controls, and this is quite a unique thing, or quite a cool thing, checks to make sure that your configuration is set up. As I said before, YAML is a pain in the butt. And if you happen to have a space in the wrong place, then this is where it's going to show up. So we've got that working. I haven't actually changed any configuration, so I have no reason to believe why it wouldn't pass. And so anyway, it's all good. So I'm just going to restart my Home Assistant instance now, and I'll come back once it's finished. Okay, so Home Assistant's now restarted. One of the things I like to do before I move on, because it will save you a bit of pain, this applies to anything to do with the Home Assistant community integration stuff. When you first install a new repository, sometimes it takes a little while for all of the components within the repository to be registered within Home Assistant. So what can happen is you can boot up Home Assistant, and then you'll see when you go into the HACS page that it's saying something like HACS unavailable, or HACS is still starting, or something like that. And that just tells you that it's still loading and registering all the different components for that software, for that piece of software. And it's best to wait until you see this type of menu. Once you've got that menu, you know that HACS is finished installing, everything's running, and you should be able to proceed. But I just want to bring your attention to something which may prevent you from having some pain in the future. This little README file is pretty good. It does explain things very clearly. However, it's not the most up-to-date. So to get the most up-to-date version of the how-to, you click on the repository. This will take you to the actual code base for this integration. Now, there's a whole long story about how integrations work. I'm not going to go into that today. If you're interested in learning more about that, then I suggest you look somewhere else. But kind of there's a bit of a clue here as to how the integrations work. But nonetheless, the point I wanted to make is that you'll notice here that for a light in particular, there's a lot more information than what you see in here. It's a bit more sparse. In fact, there's hardly anything for when it comes to describing a light. And believe it or not, that becomes quite important when you're trying to figure out why it's not working. But fortunately for you, I've already figured out how to make it work. So some of the guesswork is taken out. But I'm only showing you one device. If you're using a switch or a cover or a sensor or something else, then you may find more pain. So hopefully, I can't really help you because I'm not done it myself. So, but in the future, who knows, I might figure that out. Anyway, I'm rambling, sorry. Go to the integrations page under configuration, hit add integration, and we go local Tuya. And one of the things that I missed initially when I first was setting this up was this little line here, which kind of buries the lead. And that says devices can be configured in two ways. Now, by missing that, it really should be a larger text or written in red or something. I proceeded down the road of trying to configure everything in YAML, which, I hate YAML. If I can avoid using it, I will. But it works. I mean, if you follow this process, decoding how the YAML works, it does work. The problem with it is, well, at least as far as I'm concerned, I haven't been able to figure out how to get it to add more than one device. Perhaps somebody out there can figure that out and let me know. But you don't really need to, because there is a second way, which is using the config flow, which is what we're going to do. And really all this is if you have a bunch of your Tuya devices configured on the network of your house, there is a protocol that this software runs to discover devices. And there you go. It's discovered my device here. Now, if I, just to confirm that it is the correct device, we can confirm that the device ID is in fact the same. And of course, the IP address is the same as well. So we hit submit, and this is where that information that's on the more detailed help file became really important. So we give it a name. We need our local key. So this is the reason we had to go through all the exercise of hacking into the back of the Tuya Smart Home app to figure out what its local key is. There's just no real easy way of doing this. So we get our local key. We paste that in here. IP addresses we know, device IDs we know, protocol is version 3.3. From my experience, version 3.3 should work. If it doesn't work, you can try version 3.1. Hit submit. Now this is where it all gets a little bit weird. So we're choosing a light. It doesn't automatically know what the device is. We hit submit, and this caused me quite a bit of confusion because the details on the help file aren't very clear. It doesn't really explain it very well. But what I found is that this actually helped me. It's kind of like a decoder ring. It gave me an indication of how to identify which bit goes where. So what happens is the protocol tries its best to understand or decode information, and you can choose all these values, but only one of them works in this case, and that's that one. Give it a name, lamp. Now, what I did, what I do that I know works is I don't set any other parameters when I'm first setting it up. So we just do the ID 20, because as it says here, the ID value, which says it's usually 1 or 20. Well, in this case, it's 20. We hit submit. We don't click. We check on this to say no more entities to be added. Hit submit, finish. And now if I go into my lamp, turn it on, turn it off, and just to show you that it is in fact working, I'll bring this over here. We can turn that on, turn it off. And so that's how you work it. Now, one of the benefits of doing local Tuya integration, as I said, it's much faster. So, as you can see here, it's pretty much immediate. So the downside of using the Tuya Cloud integration, as I said before, is there's propagation delay between going from when you do an action to sending it to the cloud and then coming back. as well as those who are freaked out about data being sent to the cloud. Yeah, you know my opinion on that. So this is obviously a lot faster. Now, for those who are freaked out about data, you can also shut off the protocols in your router. I don't know how to do that in terms of which protocols are relevant. You can use a thing called Pi-hole, which is another tutorial for another day, that will allow you to essentially blacklist different protocols and different domains so that you're no longer broadcasting onto the internet, or you know, it's got a lot of features. Pi-hole is quite useful for stopping things like ad blockers and you know stuff like that. So you can essentially blacklist the device and stop it from sending out commands to the globe, updating information on your device. I'm not worried about that because I know that the fact that I bought the device, put my name into the app, and you know everything's already been registered. So whatever they want to do with my own data, they can have it because it's been provided already. So so yeah. Anyway, but there you go. So that's it. I hope that is useful. Please leave a comment and review. But be nice. If you be nasty, I will probably be nasty back because I'm that kind of arsehole. But please, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm just starting out, and if I can be bothered, I'll make more. If not, it's been nice knowing you, and have a great day.